Jared, John, thank you so much for joining me in this Mind Body Solution special series, part of the Mind at Large project. Both of you key contributors, so it's a pleasure to host you both. Thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here.
I think let's kick off with the big question at hand. The Mind at Large project, it's fully in the process. We've been promoting it, publicizing it, trying to get it out there as much as possible. It's been a hit so far. People are loving it. So I'm excited to chat to you both because you've both been part of this from the very beginning. From your perspectives, John, Jared, what is the project becoming? When you think about what has emerged across your engagements with Peter, Matt, Andrew, Ellie, the entire team, and now this conversation, what direction do you feel this is going? Perhaps, Jared, do you want to start? And then, John, we can take it from there.
Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, I feel like we are exploding out the frontiers of metaphysical thinking that involves consciousness and mindedness, agency, individuality, and yeah, really exploring what are the possible ways of thinking about these things beyond the kind of very mainstream metaphysics, often very materialistic, often dualistic, but yeah, see what happens if we can find some different frameworks that are likewise very integrative, very in tune with scientific findings, aligned with accounts of first-person experience in a wide variety of different mental states, and yeah, see what kinds of results these different frameworks can give if they're taken as sort of guiding points for different kinds of scientific and existential investigation.
John, same question.
Well, as I've been sitting in these planning meetings, and we're kind of feeling our way into getting a group of people together that both representative of alternative perspectives on the place that mind uh, has in the universe, as well as bringing in some contrary voices, some critique. We don't want to be too flippant in our approach. And so I think we're getting together a good collection of people for exploring a few different alternative ways of looking at the issue of mind in the universe, as well as some that will keep us reined in a bit and give us some good foils in the discussions.
Yeah, I think I've seen it personally. It's just growing constantly, consistently. And the more thinkers and speakers we have on board, it's just going to get more and more exciting. And that seems to be what's happening right now. You've both been part of this from the get go, as I said. To you both, John, perhaps you could start. What is Mind at Large to you?
I think it's a opportunity. No, are you asking about the conference or about the more general idea of mind at large
I
here?
think we could take it into both.
Well, I think the conference is the opportunity to explore the really quite fascinating the issues brought our last our plan for the third meeting of this is to look into psychedelic, mystical, and all kinds of extraordinary experience, which is sort of was my initial interest in these areas when I took some psychedelics and thought, well, there's a lot more here than I expected, and things are not look a lot different than I expected. So I'm looking forward to that. But I'm also very interested in the second conference, which is going to look at mind as it may appear in the universe at large, as it were. Such things as we recently did a conference on plasma and Robert Temple's book uh, with his speculations about these giant plasma clouds that are between the Earth and the Moon may contain inorganic intelligence, which really piqued my interest. I didn't think I'd find something that would be that quite that stunning at my age, and there it is. The possibility of these plasma intelligences, which could extend up into galactic and intergalactic. So there's always such a fascinating possibilities of mind through of a minded universe, and And I'm also very interested in the more colloquial mind-body relations, the mind-brain interaction, and I come at it all from kind of a Whiteheadian process philosophy perspective, which I think just offers so many interesting ways of addressing these questions.
Mm. And Jared, to you, what is Mind at Large, and then the project?
Yeah, I think I have a very similar answer to John here, especially on the conceptual side. It's being able to see mindedness, sort of experience, agency, these sorts of phenomena that we normally associate primarily, if not exclusively, with higher order organisms, as maybe more diffuse, as maybe more basic in our ontology than certainly a materialist metaphysics would presuppose. So yeah, thinking, okay, what is maybe this plasma intelligence that some cutting edge physics is beginning to hit up against and explore? Or I think of the work of Michael Levin in biology, who's dealing with these interesting Platonic morphospaces and bioelectricity and finding interesting forms of agency and becoming and intentional action at very basic levels in kind of biological realities. And so our contemporary metaphysical options on offer, especially in sciences like that, seem ill-suited to really fully explore those phenomena, unpack them on that level. And yeah, what happens if we take these things seriously and begin opening to seeing mind and intelligence in different ways than we've become accustomed to? And what happens when that becomes kind of more of a guiding paradigm in scientific thinking, especially? And yeah, I think that's a big part of what we hope to do with these conference conversations and the auxiliary projects we have around Mind at Large here is let's open the field. Let's see where mind is manifesting and what happens when we take that seriously.
Yeah, I think, and it seems to be the perfect time because there's almost this paradigm shift occurring at this moment where people are becoming a lot more curious about these conversations. I mean, from consciousness to cosmos to connection, this project embodies all of this so beautifully. And it's exciting because even when you look at both of your work, very different, very diverse, and yet ties together very beautifully as well. If you each had to name one misconception, so now we're going to explore your work individually and then we'll bring it all together a bit. If you each had to name one misconception people have about your work, John perhaps with process philosophy and transpersonal psychology, Jared with Islamic studies maybe and metamodern spirituality, what would it be? What would these misconceptions be? And why does it matter for the broader discourse on consciousness? Jared, you can take it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's unfortunately so many misconceptions about Islamic thought, Islamic intellectual history, and I mean, I think the biggest one is just a lack of awareness of the richness and diversity in this really long-standing and broad kind of intellectual heritage of Islamic civilization. Just one example that might be relevant here, the Islamic physician and metaphysician Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, had this interesting philosophical thought experiment long before our famed René Descartes of the floating man, where he went through this process of thinking what it would be like to be just a kind of disembodied experience floating in nothingness and going through the process of thinking this through, coming to a kind of reduction of you could still know mind, you could still know existence, even in this kind of void experience. And it's fascinating that far before Descartes does his own kind of skeptical method here, we have a very important Islamic thinker who's doing something at least in a similar vein, even though the conclusions and significance is different. And just how important in the history of metaphysics, even as it came into the Western world through Islamic civilization, it just had so much development in this intellectual context. And whether we're thinking about, questions of mind or causation or selfhood, there's just so much in Islamic thought traditions, whether it be Sufi spiritual, mystical metaphysics, or Islamic occasionalism that delineates interesting theory of causation that has some resonance, in fact, with the process thought of Alfred North Whitehead. There's truly just so much there. So I think a big part of what I would especially like to see in our Mind at Large conversations is just broadening the intellectual field to hopefully include these non-Western and non-modern traditions of thought that in many ways seem particularly well suited to some of our contemporary intellectual explorations.
Yeah, beautifully said. And John, for you, misconception people have about perhaps process philosophy and transpersonal psychology that you believe matters for the broader discourse on consciousness?
Well, starting with, say, psychedelic experience or any kind of extraordinary experience, I think there tends to be, on one side, people who dismiss them as, they're not real, or they're subjective. And on the other side, there are people that take them at face value and perhaps too easily as objective. So sorting out the very difficult process of sorting out how you approach subjectivity, objectivity in the first place is Whitehead's very, very helpful for, I think. And I guess I'm more concerned with those who dismiss psychedelic experience. Although I think we're now in the second emergence of psychedelics in the Western world. I think it's got a much more secure foundation, because a lot of the people that were interested in back in the 60s and 70s are now, in government, heading up departments, and so it's got a support in that way that's very different than from the 1960s. With process philosophy, Whitehead in particular, there's one group that he's a theologian. He believes in God. The God's in his system, so it's non-scientific, and that's one easy way to dismiss him. When really, although he was very extremely interested in religion, he was a mathematical physicist. First of all, he was extremely interested, throughout his life in Maxwell's equations and electromagnetic formulas. And he was, a philosopher of history, of education, of science. And so had his own theory of, critique of the theory of relativity. So to see him as some kind of theological figure is a misnomer. He's and also he can also be dismissed. Well, he's a philosopher, which doesn't have any, real bearing. We don't, the whole, science. We don't really need philosophy, because we're not doing, because we make up our own metaphysics that we go by, instead of is actually. So trying to get people to understand what the role of metaphysics and philosophy is in understanding religion and science, is, I think really, really important. And, Whitehead had the great line that the primary importance of speculative philosophy is to fuse within one system of ideas, science and religion. And, that's a big statement. And I think Whitehead has succeeded as well as anybody that I know of.
Well, great. I think let's bring this together now. John, your work in process philosophy suggests a universe made of events rather than things. And Jared, Islamic metaphysics often treats consciousness as divine, relational, or participatory. How do your frameworks converge or diverge on the basic ontology of consciousness? Anyone can start.
I hope you can handle that, Jared, because I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly steeped in the Whiteheadian tradition as well. And really, there's only kind of beginning to be some work done bridging process metaphysics and traditional Islamic systems of thought. But there's some very promising points of contact, especially in the thought of Mullah Sadra, sort of high medieval Shi'i theologian who likewise had a much more processual cosmology and reconceived kind of Aristotelian substance as it came through the Islamic tradition in a more kind of relational mode. And so this is an interesting sort of point of contact with the Whiteheadian tradition that's beginning to be explored. And likewise, there's some more contemporary figures like the founder, the intellectual kind of forefather of modern day Pakistan, and a famed poet, Allama Muhammad Iqbal, who cites Whitehead and a number of other more kind of process-inflected thinkers in some of his own philosophical work, and yeah, conceives of God in this kind of divine movement and life, and wants to move to a more processual conception of not only kind of the divine, but likewise kind of human becoming and selfhood as well, with his idea of khudi. And so there's some interesting options for crossover, for parallel, but likewise some ways that the Islamic tradition retains a bit more of the kind of classical theism of the Abrahamic traditions, but in a different mode than, say, the one that came through, especially the Protestant tradition in Christianity. So there might be ways that Muslim thinkers have conceptualized mind, selfhood, and the divine in more, say, classical sorts of ways, with reference to Plato, Aristotle, Plotinus, and their own kind of Islamic Neoplatonic intellectual forefathers that might have something there that we might want to kind of re-examine, re-excavate, and maybe our process frameworks can likewise learn something from these Islamic frameworks. So I'm really interested in kind of a mutually transformative intellectual encounter between those traditions.
John, anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, that's just what I was going to say, Jared.
Great.
I think my reading of Islamic studies is limited to Henri Corbin, so I'm afraid I'm.
Well, let's ask the biggest question that I think this podcast is fundamentally about in general, right? Mind-body solution is obviously based on the mind-body problem. Is there a mind-body problem? That's a question for another episode. But what is consciousness? John, do you think consciousness is fundamental, emergent, relational, something else entirely? And what does your preferred model explain, in your opinion, better than the alternatives?
I'm glad you asked that. When you mentioned events, I was going to sort of take off on that because events is somewhat ambiguous, since Whitehead uses it in a very often in a very technical way. And I think one of the more important things is, every time I hear that, everything's consciousness is everywhere, it seems patently false. There's a lot of stuff that, I don't think this lamp is consciousness. It seems like a bad place to start trying to convince materialists that, everything, that consciousness is pervasive. So what I think is one of the more important things that Whitehead did was to say that, that consciousness is the crown, the occasional crown of experience. And that, David Griffin, used the term pan-experientialism. So that there's experience is pervasive, but experience is can be unconscious, it can be non-conscious. And with Whitehead, the basic idea is that the past is being felt by new momentary occasions. I like the drawing on the idea of a quantum event. Quantum event incorporates through a probability field the influences of the past, and a new quantum moment event emerges. And that's the basic idea of what's going on at all levels. So in the human psyche, it's absorbing the effects of the influences of the past, directly flowing into it, So you've got internal relations going on rather than the billiard ball universe. And these momentary these events at the human level occasionally are complex enough and synthesize deeply enough the past to create a consciousness. But even with the humans, I mean, depth psychology, most of it's unconscious levels. So, to say another, I think David Griffin's really important points he makes is that differentiating between a collection of events that may have primitive experience, like the lamp sitting here. Now, the events making up that lamp have some kind of primitive experiential quality or synthetic quality, but the lamp itself doesn't generate a higher level, an emergent entity. I don't think anyway. Um, which ones do and which ones don't is a big question. But you might think of atoms and cells and molecules and human beings, and then the questions start coming up. Do galaxies, do suns, do the Corbelusky, let's see, anyway, the giant plasma clouds.
Kordylewski clouds. That's the one.
Kordylewski, there it is.
Kordylewski, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, named after the Polish astronomer who originally discovered them. But so I just find this approach so much more palatable and hopefully acceptable by people who are not immediately prone to thinking in more new age ways of thinking.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important. You bring up something very important there, is that while trying to promote and generate intrigue with this project, we have to have these back steps. We have to almost be prepared for something like that, where the misconception, the misunderstandings, the baggage that comes with it, just thinking outside of the brain for many materialists, it's quite difficult for many people. And to just bombard them with like the lamp is conscious, it's too much. You've got to have some sort of an approach here, and I think it's a fine-tuned task that's ahead of us.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm very sympathetic. I mean, the world does look like it's a bunch of objects. I mean, our experience does prone us to think that, incline us to think that way and experience that way. Part of that, I think, is a bias in the way language has developed and our thinking patterns have developed. But part of it is that, if you look around, I think, most, even without these biases, the world does look like these. So the way Descartes saw it, these three-dimensional objects, which is one reason I particularly like Whitehead's idea that you draw on evidence from everywhere. I did a lot of studied a lot of phenomenology and love phenomenology, but I thought, it doesn't. How do you fit phenomenology with science, with history, with a lot of other? You can't draw in all this fascinating evidence that's not part of the experiential life, conscious experiential life world. And so Whitehead, we'll draw on physics, we'll draw on mathematics, we'll draw on neurology, and then put together a package of how this all adds up for understanding the nature of things.
Mm. And Jared, to you, what is consciousness?
Yeah, I feel like the way I think about these big philosophical questions like this, I don't know if I end up with a final answer or a real definitive framework that I put my stake on and sort of denounce other frameworks as inadequate. But I definitely do find a lot of value in the kind of Whiteheadian pan-experientialist framework that John just did a phenomenal job outlining. I think it treads the right middle ground between a kind of crude panpsychism where it's like, wait, really? Are we sure that atoms are having the same kind of reflective sort of self-conscious mode of experience that we as human beings are? I think that is quite implausible, and I think it's not ridiculous that many would sort of balk at that proposition. But the idea that okay, there's some kind of first person aspect to all centers of experience, all objects, that there's a what it's likeness to an atom, to a river, and that the kind of causal influences that coalesce to manifest these various things in our reality have some quality of interiority to them, but it's different though than the very refined and complex interiority of, say, the human person that is marked by this self-reflective, introspective, metacognitive mode of consciousness. And so it's a framework I use a lot in life. I feel like it has both existential and more kind of scientific value to it, and it's able to, yes, integrate those things together in the way that John is saying. But I've found various modes of idealism to be rich and having a certain intellectual vitality to them and plausibility. Some of those schemes I worry about too totalizing, too monistic of a metaphysics. And I think that is likewise one of the problems with thoroughgoing materialism as well. Part of me wonders if we need just a radical polyontology where some things are events, some things are substances. Maybe consciousness is fundamental in some contexts or cases and not in others, and less satisfying and harder to use that kind of a standpoint as a robust and stable framework for things like scientific investigation. But I think it's worthwhile even exploring kind of that level of speculative metaphysics, where any sense of a sort of non-local foundation is disregarded, and we're able to, yeah, think very wildly and freely, at least in ways that still have certain kind of guardrails and intentions to them, and to be integrative and adequate to experience and evidence.
Yeah, Jared, you mentioned a big part of it is the existential component to it for you as well. It's a big part of it. And a major thread in your work is responding to contemporary nihilism and the meaning crisis. How does Islamic metaphysics, and especially its contemplative traditions, address meaning in ways that modernity has just completely neglected?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, let me try and tie some stuff together here. So John briefly mentioned the 20th century French scholar of Islam, Henri Corbin, and a big part of his work was investigating this idea of imagination in traditions of Sufi and Shi'i spirituality. And for these Islamic thinkers, imagination was not just being able to dream up a scene in your kind of isolated mind, and it's this purely subjective interior reality. But imagination was a kind of basic faculty of both perception and creation. So when we are in an imaginative experience, say, especially in like a visionary mystical experience, we aren't just seeing some private vision that is idiosyncratic to our own atomized consciousness, but actually we're in some kind of reciprocal relationship with various kinds of ideal, divine, archetypal realities that are appearing to us in the imaginative vision in ways that are unique to our own psychology, our own kind of individuality, but they are also exemplary of realities beyond ourselves in this, yeah, say more kind of divine realm or realm of forms. And so I think this is a great framework for psychedelic visionary experience, as it is able to strike a middle ground between, on the one hand, a very kind of reductive, more materialist conception where it's like, oh, there's chemicals in my brain, so I'm getting weird perceptions because of how my neurons are firing, which is definitely true. That's part of this. But if that's all you can say, you're in a hermeneutically kind of diminished capacity to actually make sense of like what could well be one of the most profound experiences of your life. If all you could say is my brain was doing something weird of your peak mystical experience, you're probably not going to be in a great position to integrate that and reap as much wisdom and benefit from it as you could. On the other hand, though, it's very easy to get overtaken by those kinds of experiences and think that you have seen the singular divine truth, and something has been kind of fully revealed to you, and you get it all now, and maybe you even are sort of veering into a spiritual psychosis on the other side of that type of peak experience, and it's a real danger. And this Islamic perspective of imagination allows you to kind of qualify these visions, play with them hermeneutically. The Arabic word is tahwil for kind of esoteric interpretation. And so there's a real way that these things need to be wrestled with and integrated, and can't be taken at face value. And you need to wrestle with your own soul to actually kind of get them to really reveal themselves fully. And so that kind of interpretive meaning making process that comes out of this, say, more metaphysics of imagination and this kind of Neoplatonic stacked cosmology allows for a real, an emanation downwards of insight and revelation from a cosmos that is diffuse with meaning, but also a sort of emergent process of your own struggling to grapple with interpreting these various signs in the cosmos, and not having this hubris of thinking one understands immediately.
And John, from a process philosophical lens, what is the root of the meaning crisis? Is it metaphysical, psychological, spiritual, or a breakdown in narrative coherence? Or none of the above?
I don't know. I think I mean, I think I'd be stating a lot of the obvious, that well, I guess I'll go along David Griffin's thinking again, that our worldview helps stabilize us in everything with the way we understand things. And so with the collapse of religion largely worldwide, and from the influences of a scientific worldview, and the two of them not being able to be reconciled, leaves us a lot of people adrift, the doubting the religion, yet knowing something's missing, that we don't, everything isn't some kind of purely objective, rational, logical formula that can be worked out scientifically. And I know my parents, my mother was berought up religiously, and then went to college and discovered that God doesn't exist, and that was a big shock, back in the 1940s. That was a huge, it's been a huge thing for a while, but I think it became sort of hit culture more widely than it did the major intellectual influences who saw it early on, like Nietzsche. This impact's really been unfolding. And then there's the reactions of the fundamentalist churches, because people want community. The lack of community is a huge part of it. And there's a scientific community, but that really doesn't provide community for the masses of the world. So I think it's a collapse of a central sense of connection to community and to something larger. And that's one of the, I think what's so important is trying to put together a worldview that incorporates the best of religion and science and life in general into a coherent thing that people can believe in, because it resonates with who they are and who we are, and find a way to share that effectively. David Griffin has a nice little book called Two Great Truths. And so he looks at what's great about religion and where it's gone wrong, and what's great about science and where it's wrong, and perhaps how they can be put together. We're not, Humpty Dumpty can still be put together again in some form or another. Maybe not, not the original ones, obviously, but I think Whitehead was very concerned. I don't want to sound like complete like a one-trick pony, but I pretty much am. That I think he's done does a great job of, as I said, trying to fuse religion and science into one scheme of thought. And I just want to throw in with when Jared was talking about uh, having mystical experiences and separating out the wheat from the chaff, as it were. I think one of my big concerns was trying to understand what psychedelic experiences mean and how they could happen, and that's another place Whitehead was so helpful. This idea that each new human level event not only incorporates the feelings, as it were, and data from the brain, but more generally has an open access to the entire past. So, this opens up, if God's floating around, we're at some deep level, we're being informed by God. We're being informed by, the Kordylewski clouds. If we can have something that kind of breaks open our usual way of being in the world to access what's flowing in from the depths, real stuff is coming in. But as Jared pointed out, it's being funneled through a lot of our own past experience and ways of thinking. And so sorting that out's a major task.
Mm. Where do you guys both see the deepest overlap between process philosophy and meta-modern spirituality in constructing a meaning-generating worldview adequate for the 21st century?
Yeah, I think for me it would definitely be the discourses process thinkers spearheaded in the later 20th century and onwards of constructive postmodernism, as I think David Ray Griffin maybe coined that term. But yeah, having this perspective that takes modernity and sees its real values, sees it turns out we have medicine that is quite effective at helping people, at developing new cures, at doing all these things that are life-preserving and very positive. So we don't want to be reactively anti-modern. We obviously want some of these. Yet seeing, all these critical perspectives that came in the wake of modernism as having some real value to them, of seeing the ways that large kind of grand narratives are a little over totalizing and leave things out, and the way that the reductionism of a lot of modern thought wasn't able to incorporate some very valuable aspects of human life and kind of stitch things together. So the process thinkers developed this constructive postmodern discourse and drew on Whitehead, William James, a number of other kind of Anglo-American thinkers outside of the typical analytic tradition, though, that had a little bit more cosmology, had a little bit more speculative philosophy to them, to kind of chart a different path than, say, the one that was predominantly taken by continental, especially French post-structuralist thinkers. And see what kind of constructive postmodern response could be given. And a lot of what many thinkers nowadays using the term metamodernism are doing is really quite similar, though they have different intellectual sources than the process thinkers did. And so it's interesting watching this kind of emergent discourse develop that in some ways is paralleling the process constructive postmodern tradition, but in other ways is kind of making its own stakes. I'd say in general, metamodernism is a broader term, and there's a number of different understandings of what it means and different usages of it, both inside academia and in kind of a broader cultural mode. And so I think it's, yeah, a little bit more encompassing of different traditions, different sources for nonetheless doing this kind of intellectual project of incorporating critique of modernism while also trying to shepherd the best of modern thinking forward in a new mode that kind of is a little more balanced, a little more harmonious.
John, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think Jared's covered it pretty well. Pretty damn well.
Well, when you look at both your work, from both your perspectives, what do you think psychedelics and classical mystical traditions agree and disagree on regarding the structure of reality? John, you could start.
Say that one more time, please.
So, when it comes to, for example, your work on, let's say, holotropic breath work and transpersonal psychology intersects with altered states and expanded consciousness. And then Jared's work with comparative religion and Islamic mysticism, he studies that. And if you think about psychedelics sort of within this sphere, what do psychedelics and classical mystical traditions agree and disagree on regarding the structure of reality?
The biggest influence for me with the psychedelic universe was Stanislav Grof's work. I did holotropic breathwork training with him, and he was on my dissertation committee, and I was just talking to him, actually. He's in his mid-90s, so I wish he could come. Otherwise, I'd be inviting him to this to the Mind at Large conference, but I don't think he's doing that anymore. I found that his approach was to do a cartography of extraordinary experience, basically, and he drew on thousands of psychedelic experiences that he sat in on and you might say supervised, but really just observed and followed up on, as well as tens of thousands of holotropic experiences. So it creates a base of the varieties of psychedelic experience, as Gene Houston and Robert Masters' book title, and comes up with the various areas and categories of kinds of experiences people have. And I find this really helpful rather than trying to think which are the right experiences, where are things wrong, although he has, I think, three ultimate experiences, which are, what are they? The metacosmic void, and these things, by the way, in my book, I think fit really quite well with sort of a Whiteheadian understanding of what an ultimate entity in the universe might be like. I think one place I tend to, I don't know if disagree with, is I really like Houston Smith, and I love Huxley's, but this notion that I think they tended to be caught up a little bit in some of the Indian philosophical monism a little bit too much. That there's this one truth and one so I love William James' more pluralistic universe, and that there's different modes of experiencing ultimate mystical experiences. And I also like Whitehead because I think it kind of gives you a center to kind of pull together how those different modes might be connected. I turn it over to Jared to be more clear.
Yeah, you're in luck. I did my undergraduate thesis on pretty much this topic, actually. So I do have some thoughts, and one of them that has really kind of emerged stronger and stronger in my thinking over time is connects back to what I was saying in terms of imagination and hermeneutics. That there isn't a psychedelic or traditional mystical experience that is somehow devoid of our own interpretation. We are always kind of making meaning of these types of peak experiences. There can be very intense moments of them that feel luminous and revelatory, but especially as we return to sober consciousness and try to make sense of okay, what is what significance can I draw from say this mystical vision or this encounter with the machine elf in the DMT experience? That's always a process of interpretation that we're going through, and I think it's really important that we don't sort of shirk that responsibility. That we yeah, really have a strong sense of, okay, I'm doing a interpretive maneuver here with a deeply intense and obscure kind of personal experience, and I need to, yeah, be responsible for that. So you hear sometimes of people who have these intense psychedelic experiences for a first time, and they get all these revelations and have this intense kind of visionary experience. And on the other side of that, they're like, oh, it turns out Mother Ayahuasca told me to divorce my wife and go be a monk in the mountain, and I just got to do that. And it's like, well, there's something there. There's obviously something there that you want to really wrestle with and unpack. Maybe you are deeply unhappy in this relationship. Maybe though, also this is a kind of avoidant fear response that came up and manifested in this profound way in this visionary experience. And you can't defer that interpretive responsibility to the experience itself. So whether we're talking about, say, traditional Buddhist enlightenment, samadhi type experiences, a Christian, say, a vision of the Virgin Mary, or some kind of psychedelic experience, I think there's always going to be this process of interpretation and wrestling that we need to go through. And having a metaphysics that isn't too reductive in either direction of yeah, either reifying these types of visions into, well, this is my kind of religious vision that has the kind of highest epistemological value I can imagine, and it just is what it is. So I'm gonna make some dramatic sudden changes into how I'm living. Or if we are doing the kind of reductive materialist mode of saying, oh, I had some wacky hallucinatory brain experience that doesn't have any significance. Neither of those options kind of give you a good grounding to productively integrate and move forward with taking this experience as revelatory and enlightening, but in a way that nonetheless balances with your life, social aspects, and all sorts of other entanglements we have.
Yeah, I think these experiences have a way of fundamentally changing big ontological pictures, experiences of life, death, continuity. It impacts so many different realms, and I think one of the important ones we should discuss is something like death or these big ontological problems. John, in your book, Processing Reality, it explores death, psychedelics, and sobriety through a process lens. And Jared, many Islamic theologians argue that death is a transition rather than an endpoint. How do your frameworks rethink the boundaries between life and death? Judd?
Well, David Griffin again has a really interesting book called Parapsychology, Philosophy, and Spirituality. And he looks at, well, first of all, he presents how Whitehead's metaphysics allow for the possibility of there being the psyche existing outside of a body. And so, but then he wants to look at, well, that's if it's possible, does it actually happen? And so he looks at out-of-body experiences. He looks at medium-esque experiences. He looks at reincarnation, ghost experiences, and finds a lot of really interesting, highly suggestive evidence to this nature. So then he concludes that, nobody knows. Well, he doesn't know anyway, whether or not there's continued existence of some sort after death. But it's a metaphysical possibility. And there's a lot of interesting evidence pointing in that direction. But he also makes a quite interesting suggestion that it's not just either or. There's other possibilities that we might have various kinds of continuing existence. Different kinds of reincarnation. We might have different kinds of unitive experiences with the universe. And he also suggests that we might also have a choice. We might choose to go on. We might think, well, that was plenty. That's enough. And I think Whitehead was inclined to think probably not. And Charles Hartshorne, one of his great disciples, as it were, felt like I think he felt it was kind of greedy to think that there's more. We contribute to God's richness through our own experience and God experience. That isn't enough to generate deep meaning in life. And but it's I think it's really important, that after I read David Griffin's book, I thought, it's kind of interesting. It's more likely than I thought, which is also kind of a scary notion because the Buddhist from some perspective, the main Buddhist project is to end reincarnations, to get out of the game. It opens up possibilities. It'd be the way I'd put it.
Jared, your view?
Yeah, well, at least typical Islamic thinkers are definitely going to have a stronger conception of a soul as a center of experience that is able to continue on post-mortem of the physical body. But interestingly, for Islamic thought, the soul also pre-existed material body, which is different from, say, a typical Christian perspective, unless you're in one of the various early Christian heresies. I forget which one. I think Origen, actually, the church father, had this perspective as well. But I see Christian thinkers returning to it now, but it's for a long time been pretty controversial. But in any ways, that's a very much Orthodox Islamic perspective coming right out of certain verses of the Quran. So yeah, very strong sense of both pre-existent and post-mortem sort of center of experience of the soul, the nafs in Arabic. And how exactly this experience proceeds after the biological death of the physical form has definitely been a matter of debate over the course of Islamic intellectual history. But I think that aspect of the pre-existence is maybe even a little more interesting than the typical question of the life after death, as Islamic thought puts a lot of significance into that and says that, okay, there's some basic kind of orientations or modes of recognition that the human person has at baseline due to the sort of experience the soul had in pre-eternity when it was still kind of in the overall divine life and not yet in our kind of material cosmos. So an interesting kind of point for meaning making and things like that.
Yeah, and Jared, you've written about the potential of Islam as a resource for interfaith dialogue and global meaning making, and which is something I find similar with John's work with the global contemplative and philosophical traditions. Within this meaning making essence, what would a truly cross-civilizational philosophy of consciousness look like with that in mind?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, what a big project, huh? I think it would need to involve yeah, bringing together as many different rich sophisticated frameworks as possible within, say, a narrower slice of our global civilization. I think the Neoplatonic heritage that is prominent within all the Abrahamic faiths, but also beyond, kind of stretching down to that early Hellenic period of philosophical and mystical investigation. I think there's a lot of potential there for, at least among Muslims, Christians, and Jews, to kind of rally around a framework that can kind of cross uh, some of those confessional boundaries, while having a metaphysics that is relatively consonant or consistent. But I mean, there's reasons that we've moved away from Neoplatonic modes of thought as well. And I think one of the ways to understand the process tradition is kind of trying to do something similar, to serve a similar role as the Neoplatonic tradition did in more classical times, of this, yeah, large scale, general metaphysical framework that can have an expression in various different theological and confessional traditions, and translate between them effectively. And I think that's why we've seen these process discourses of deep religious pluralism pop up and be so influential. Likewise, John mentioned Huxley and Houston Smith, their kind of perennialist project, along with other thinkers like Sayyid Hussein Nasr, a living Islamic philosopher, in this kind of overall traditionalist school, are doing very interesting projects as well, bringing together likewise Eastern, say, Advaita Vedanta, Hindu metaphysics with some of these more Western Neoplatonic modes of thought, finding points of integration there. Another theologian alive today who's doing something somewhat similar is David Bentley Hart in the Eastern Orthodox tradition. He likewise draws upon both these early church fathers, Maximus the Confessor. He likes Origen, and but brings in the Hindu metaphysics as well, of which there are certainly many varieties. So I think there's options, there's points of contact. The cognitive scientist John Vervaeke is trying to do a Zen Neoplatonist project. I find the work of the Kyoto school that he draws on for some of that very influential and compelling, which integrates, yeah, say, types of Zen thinking with various strands of Western theological and philosophical reflection. So let's kind of acknowledge all of those and see what happens if we throw them in a big bag together, scramble them up, and yeah, see what kinds of chimeras we can create that allow for this cross-pollination, these streams of dialogue to emerge. But I don't think we're going to end up with just one final totalizing framework, but the more we can have at play and interacting with each other, the better.
Yeah, Jared says, I mean, he doesn't think it will eventually become one, but do you think that we are sort of moving toward a new shared metaphysics, something that transcends individual traditions yet honors them? And what might this include?
Well, oops. Jared is afraid of this one.
We seem to have lost Jared. Oh, he's back.
Hey, you can't get off that easy, buddy. The following up on Jared just a little bit, for an example, that John Cobb did quite a bit of interreligious activity, and one of his great books is Beyond Dialogue, where he goes with the Buddhists and a conversation with Buddhism. And it's done in such a, he doesn't want to explain away Buddhism. He wants to have, a mutual interaction in informing. And Whitehead has a famous line that his philosophy in many ways has more in common with certain Asiatic strains of thought than with Western philosophy. And so, I think some kind of some kind of organic realism, some kind of organic philosophy in the tradition of Schilling and William James's pluralism and Whitehead's metaphysics, and I think something of that general sort, which can be adopted and be non-totalizing in a lot of ways, although it's an attempt to be a picture of everything. I'm certainly hopeful that might bring together people into a common way of thinking, and I should for those who are panicking, should mention that Whitehead was the first to say that his ideas were not final, that speculative philosophy is an ongoing attempt and to put together frames of thought with imperfect language that can never fully accommodate the nature of reality and is always imperfect and always being improved and as new ideas come forth and new metaphysical concepts. Charles Hartshorne does have a wonderful quote somewhere about Whitehead's idea of the events incorporating past in a creative synthesis, saying, he calls it the greatest metaphysical generalization in history because it brings together. Well, wait, I have to quote it. I have it here somewhere. I love it so much. Oop, not there. I'll look it up. I'll let you go on, and I'm going to look it up.
Look, you can bring it up if you'd like.
I have it here. I put together a few notes, which fortunately I haven't had to bother you guys with. Well, Bill Wilson, who's the founder of AA, also had a wonderful quote about science. He says, "I had a scientific schooling. Naturally, I respected, venerated, even worshipped science. As a matter of fact, I still do, all except the worship part."
I like that.
And the Hartshorne quote is, causality, substance, memory, perception, temporal succession, modality are all but modulations of one principle of creative synthetic experience, feeding entirely on its own prior products. I consider this the most powerful metaphysical generalization ever accomplished.
Wow.
And by the way, Charles Hartshorne is a brilliant philosopher in his own right. He was still writing great books at age 100. So he's got what is it? Insights. I think insights and oversights of great thinkers, because he knew almost all the 20th century's major philosophers, and that's a wonderful little book, and quite accessible.
When you guys look at this, I mean, even having these dialogues and discussions, it's pretty cool because we know that this is evolving, growing. The Minded Lodge project itself do you see it as participating in a larger historical movement, akin to what William James, Whitehead, Ibn Arabi envisioned in their respective eras?
I would like to think so. I would, with a good dose of humility, hope that we can, participate in something with, similarly broad and scoping aims, and bring in as much together as possible, as much diversity of thought in ways that can, hopefully coalesce into some really interesting speculations and frameworks and friendships. So,
yeah,
I think this little group has the flexibility and ability to bring together groups of people that might not normally be at a conference, in a combination of formal and informal way of interaction that I think is very valuable for exploring ideas in different ways, and also bringing people into contact, creating new collegial connections. So I think this is I think a lot could come out of this. This is not going to change the alone change the trajectory of Western civilization, but I think it's part of that trajectory.
Yeah, it's a small step towards the bigger whole. It's part of the puzzle, and we're just a piece that's going to try and complete this beautiful puzzle. This project is huge. It's going to be diverse, bringing various different thinkers, unique in many ways. And as you just said, the type of people that people are expecting to come together, I mean, and what they're going to get is going to be very different. People are just, it's going to be an amazing amalgamation of different cultures, philosophies, encounters. And for those who are materialists, fundamentally skeptical about it, there's going to be materialists there as well. So everyone just needs to know that this is not just an anti-materialism campaign. It's rather a diversity of thought mission to move and think with new ideas and new intentions. What do you both think each other bring to this table with that in mind? So, John, when it comes to Jared, what do you think is great about the fact that Jared's in this team, part of this Mind at Large project, and what he brings to this project?
Well, besides his incredible technical abilities and being able to help us with a lot of the framework and technology, I've only known Jared for a few years, but number one, he's bringing this whole Islamic perspective that I don't think, and a whole sort of more really a whole alternative framework to the conference, rather than just this our traditional sort of Western philosophical thing. But he's also very familiar with the Western thing, so he's quite a remarkable mind. I wish I had it. He's quite brilliant, and it's very, as somebody who is on the older end of the framework, and as a lot of Whiteheadians gatherings tend to be older people, it's very encouraging. The group, Jared's the youngest, but this group is, in general, by my perspective, pretty young, and it's really encouraging and hopeful for me that these ideas are continuing to be developed and not only perpetuated, but worked out in new ways that are quite exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that John is bringing the transpersonal and psychedelic experiences, especially as key components, key frameworks here. I mean, I've certainly done a good bit of work in psychedelic thought as well, and the way that John has used process and transpersonal thinking to kind of delineate and unpack and interpret these peak experiences that, hey, people are really doing these substances regularly. They're doing them in medical context. They're doing them in New Age spiritual context. We really need modes of thought that are able to integrate and bridge these experiences now more than ever. And I think John's work is uniquely poised in that regard to help. And I mean, all the implications in terms of metaphysics of mind are so poignantly revealed in those discourses. So yeah, I'm very interested in how peak and non-ordinary, extraordinary experiences ought to be taken into account as important ontological data when we're thinking metaphysically about consciousness, mind, selfhood, agency. I think these have been a little neglected, and a sober consciousness has been too foregrounded as normative in a lot of our thinking around these things in a way that has skewed our frameworks. So I think incorporating those experiences and having frameworks that do them justice in critical ways is crucial right now.
Yeah, look, I completely agree with both of you. It's so great to have such diverse and connected thinkers come together in this way. It's only going to make for an amazing project altogether. So let's move into a little bit of ethics for now. So I think perhaps, John, you could start with this. If consciousness is relational and reality is a process, what is the ethical center of such a universe? What becomes of responsibility, compassion, moral agency?
Well, I mean, there's two answers. One is if there's this God who's entering into our experience all the time, informing us, then that's the center. But let's leave that one aside. But if we're deeply, if we're deeply interflowing relational beings, then the natural compassion is sort of the feeling with feel the one of the ways of describing the way prehensions, Whitehead's, the way one event feels another, it's the feelings of others. So if we're constantly in this deep undertow area of feeling the feelings of others, we're essentially sympathetic or compassionate beings. So I would, if we can open up those channels or heighten our awareness of those channels, that would be an enormous, and I think psychedelics can help do that. And people put it in terms of connection or breaking out of isolation, or open, or creating compassionate. But from this process perspective, that's who we are really. That's our essential being. So if you throw in God, you've got a whole extra reinforcement there. But I don't. You don't necessarily need to add that into the process perspective for it to be essentially an ethical way of metaphysics.
Mm.
Jared can probably make that better, however, say that more effectively.
Let's see what I
Jared,
got. Yeah.
You want to take it from there?
Sure. Yeah, one thing I really like about the process, metaphysics, coming out of Whitehead, but I think we're seeing this converge from a number of different philosophical traditions right now, is understanding value as ontologically primitive. So if, say, experience goes all the way down, well, what does that mean? For Whitehead, it means that valuation has a kind of basic ontological status as well. That's what's kind of happening as things become in experience. They are valuing their possibilities for becoming, feeling, prehending those potentials, and making a decision on how to develop out of all these multifarious causal influences that kind of coalesce to create a particular event. But what that means is, well, morality is maybe a pretty similar to consciousness. It might be this kind of higher order phenomena of valuation. But if valuation itself is ontologically basic, it helps us, see moral decision making not just as this kind of atomized, peculiar human thing we need to deal with that is kind of arbitrary. We don't know where it came from or why we have this, but actually it's an expression, an exemplification of kind of the basic qualities of the cosmos we find ourselves in our human mode of existence. So my colleague Andrew Davis, who you talked with, talks about, yes, the anthropocosmic sort of dimension of human being and meaning making, that we exemplify these basic features of the cosmos, these valuation, meaning making process, becoming, that we aren't this aberration that a lot of kind of materialist metaphysics especially takes us as, that the human being is this kind of weird thing that has this consciousness, and we don't really know how that fits in our framework, but rather totally inverse. Okay, the human being actually is a poignant exemplification of taking some of these basic features of the cosmos and intensifying them, kind of complexifying them, developing them further. So as we grapple with moral questions and that aspect of life, feeling that we're doing something that is a deep expression of some of the basic modes of interaction and relation of the cosmos we find ourselves in, rather than something that's weird and alien and peculiar, unique to us as human beings. I think that helps even just in that process, make it more kind of meaningful and connected rather than isolated and atomized. And also helps us consider moral interactions with beings other than just fellow humans. And I think ecologically, this is especially important right now as we consider maybe the biosphere as a whole is a kind of relevant sort of thing we're in relationship with in terms of our ethics, our morals. Maybe an ecosystem as a whole likewise is a relevant kind of moral counterpart for us, and certainly various kinds of organisms. Maybe we have a moral obligation to the atmosphere, maybe to the pH of the ocean, and seeing that value is dispersed all along our cosmos helps kind of hone us in on thinking in those ways.
John, anything about that you'd like to add on or comment on?
Yeah, thanks for reminding me about the intensity. Whitehead has God's primary is the fostering of intensity of experience, and thus molecules are more intense than atoms, cells, and humans can be very intense. I think I suggest that psychedelics may be the ultimate religious sacrament for their intensification ability, but. And also God, Whitehead, his theory of events is an aesthetic theory. It's the bringing together into a new whole in a aesthetic way. And so creation of beauty is one of the primary dimensions of reality. Whitehead also makes kind of a funny comment somewhere along the line, towards the end of Process and Reality, that God is a little oblivious to morals. So his idea of religion was not that it's a set of morals to live by. I think for him it was much more of a living vitality, and his family. I think it wasn't his brother and his uncle were both I think his uncle was a bishop, or his brother was a bishop in India. And his father, I believe, was a minister. So he came out of a religious tradition, but he also, kind of gave up on religion I think after his son was killed in World War I, and then almost converted to Catholicism. So he wasn't somebody that was, religious from for his whole life. He worked apparently also at one point at this enormous theological library, which then he gave away, when he had his, I think, more agnostic period. So he worked, he worked through these ideas very, very carefully. As he did with everything.
Which I think is a great sign, because it shows an evolving thinker and someone willing to change their mind, willing to grow with the ideas, which is pretty much what we want out of this project, is to get people together, let them explore new ideas, explore topics that possibly diverge from their general day-to-day lifestyle. What role do you think, both of you, religious and philosophical traditions will play 50 years from now in shaping our understanding of consciousness, meaning, death, transformation, etc.?
Yeah, I think they're going to continue to have relevance and influence. I think we're starting to see kind of right now on the other end, on the other side of a kind of more intense new atheist moment, that these things are being reconsidered. Some people are returning to traditional religious systems and trying to find the most depth and richness they can in these. Some people are doing this in a more reactive way, and that's unfortunate. But there's also kind of a larger constituency of people who remain unaffiliated with traditional religious beliefs and institutions, but nonetheless, they are taking existential and spiritual questions seriously, and not deferring to the kind of dismissal of a more intensive materialist atheism. And so I think being able to provide more sophisticated and dynamic religious systems that have a real philosophy and structured metaphysics behind them, it's going to be important and appealing. And the more that there can be live options for those available, the better I think things will go as people continue to kind of grapple and return to some of these questions.
Yeah, John, your views on that?
I have a friend out in California who's been working as a kind of advising some of the Protestant churches on how to reinvigorate them, how to, a lot of Protestant churches are of the more liberal variety are just losing membership, and they have been for a while, and it seems to be continuing. So he's been working with them, and he's sort of a Whitehead, a process thinker, and he feels like they have to do something different. David Griffin writes that the fundamentalists have these speaking in voices and these huge gatherings, and people need to feel to have an experiential base for to ground and I think to make it feel like it's real. I just picked up a book. I can't think of the I had just started reading it by this woman who's anthropologist who's basically arguing that rites and rituals and various things, they aren't, that's what they create the experience and the connection. They aren't there to celebrate the connection. They are the way people enter into religious experience. And I hope the religions with the kind of liberal point of view for society that I think is important are able to somehow incorporate this. I'm not highly optimistic, but I think I think we're going to be facing more and more difficult times ahead in almost all areas, and hopefully, it could be dramatically different. And I think as those things unfold, people are going to be looking for something to hold on to, and hopefully it won't be fascism. Hopefully it won't be demonology. Hopefully it will be some positive way of integrating a new religious and philosophical ethic, that will help us through those times. It's kind of what I was trying to do in my book, to kind of show a possible vision, forward of how we might find meaning in the world and experience it and think of the world in a different way, and hopefully philosophy and religion can do that. It's not going to be easy.
Do you think it'll be easier if we added a little bit of psychedelics to it?
Well, I think I was probably more hopeful for that with the first time I took psychedelics, but I do. I think psychedelics, used prudently, can help break us out of our what did Pete Townsend has, let my love open the door. What's a great line? No, it's from, I think, Tommy. Messiahs pointed to the door, but no one had the guts to leave the temple. I think psychedelics can help open up, or actually throw us through those doors for a little while, and hopefully, if they're integrated, as Jared points out, in helpful ways for people in society, maybe that'll be what makes the difference. I hope so.
Yeah, and then one thing that we know based on history is that many cultures, religious cultures, had some version of a psychotherapy session within many prayers, many cultural get-togethers. It's very common, and back then it was still always taken as a very respectful, generally in a big group, lots of people coming together. There was a place for it until it was obviously demonized at some point, but I think it was something that throughout history we've seen the positive effects of bringing all of that together, the community of religion, the philosophy behind them all, and then this almost dissolving and resolving with whatever substance was being taken.
Things like raves are pretty close to that, except they don't really have a religious context to funnel that into something more.
Yeah, you sort of want a nice philosophical grounded experience beyond that. What are your thoughts on that, Jared?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many cross-cultural examples of various mystical and shamanic traditions, some of which use directly psychedelic substances or entheogens, mind-altering substances generally. Many of which don't, though. I mean, you can also get some of these types of experiences certainly through various breathing techniques. John certainly knows a lot about holotropic breath work coming out of Stanislav Grof's tradition and others. There's various fasting techniques and drumming, all kinds of modes of playing with our consciousness that all sorts of cultures have, taken as kind of basic practices to be incorporated. And it seems that there was a real function or utility, and maybe some of that has to do with the neuroplasticity that could be induced by certainly psychedelic substances, but other sorts of experiences can tend in that direction as well. Increased creativity and insight. But also empathy and connection, both to your fellow human beings and also to the ecosystem, the broader natural world, the cosmos as a whole. And so I think, looking at various kinds of shamanism in a sort of loose sense, and how these types of experiences were pursued and incorporated in various cultural contexts, and maybe how there could be other uses for these psychedelic substances in our current moment beyond just kind of the individual medical function. Maybe there's some kind of ways that these ought to be leveraged in a more communal sense towards meaning-making, insight, cultivation of solidarity, as certainly those were some of the effects that emerged in these traditional contexts. And I mean, the archaic mode of human existence is certainly the one that lasted the longest. There's a lot of human history that was prehistory that happened in this more kind of tribal, shamanic context, which obviously was ecologically very attuned and seemed to be quite stable for a very long time. And so we do well to take this very seriously and see what may have been lost in the long years of history from these types of modes of human culture that still exist in various pockets. I'm very interested in a archaic futurism, a new shamanism as potential options for alleviating some of the meaning crisis stuff, finding some more ecologically attuned modes of relating and existing, and also having interesting things to contribute to metaphysics of mind.
I think it's a beautiful time specifically because we get to explore all of this together. When you look at Jared with metamodernism emphasizes sincerity within irony, hope within critique. John with process thought, it emphasizes creativity within constraint. So these ideas sort of come together and offer this new ethic in a way to navigate this uncertainty, which I think is really great. And something that I wanted to bring up with the both of you was when you think about something like Islam and how much people are moving towards Islam at this point in life, there's clearly a philosophical shift occurring with thinking. And then for Jared, I wanted to ask you about it. And John, the same thing with process philosophy. As you said earlier, you said there's lots of older guys in the group would be talking about it, but you're surprised that there's all these younger people. But that's also a shift that's occurring. So you've got both these different philosophies in a sense, just growing. Do you guys perhaps want to touch on that and discuss why that is and what you think about it?
Yeah, I think people are hungry. People are hungry for different sorts of frameworks than just what has yeah been kind of percolating in the broader Western culture, especially the past yeah really couple centuries in some sense. But yeah, what kinds of philosophies can actually yeah integrate, especially various modes of knowing and truth and make sense of our experience while still having something like critical and effective to say the ways that the natural sciences are able to. And I mean, one of the things I think is drawing people to Islam in particular is wow, this is a really global tradition that has such a history, such a depth to it, and you can yeah have a kind of an immediate connection with say between people from Indonesia and Egypt, and wow, that's quite something. The ways that Islamic civilization was able to really kind of yeah tread an interesting balance between kind of diversity and unity is definitely kind of an inspiring history. You have these different legal and theological schools within the Sunni majority, and while they certainly have their differences and stake their claims on certain perspectives, they nonetheless recognize each other's legitimacy and orthodoxy. And so you have people from the Maliki legal school and the Hanafi legal school. They can absolutely go to the same mosque, pray together, even as their bodies might be in slightly different positions during the prayers. And so I think there's yeah something we can learn about how to have a deep kind of spiritual and philosophical unity, but still be able to yeah have a lot of speculation and diversity of opinion. And Islamic civilization is an interesting example of that, and one that is counter to especially the history of religion in the West following the Reformation. So yeah, I think that's certainly something that people can be drawn to, feeling that diversity, that richness, but feeling that, oh, if I go down one of these particular paths, it's not going to divide me from my co-religionists. I'm not going to get siloed in the same way that you can in other religious contexts. Not that there's not also problems with the contemporary intellectual scene in the Islamic world, to be sure, but there's a lot to be drawn to, certainly.
And John, your thoughts on the process philosophy boom occurring right now? Firstly,
Yeah.
do you see that boom occurring?
Um, yes, I think it's kind of interesting. One, I think Jared was right. There's a hunger for these things. I think that's maybe the primary thing. But these things are kind of move in a interesting way. Whitehead's ideas were very, very popular and influential in the 20s and 30s and 40s, and then slowly in the academy they started fading away as analytic philosophy took over and various other trends that made metaphysics and speculative philosophy pushed off to the side. However, the people people also started, those who still involved started writing in ways that to make his ideas more accessible to a larger public. And his ideas got picked up by Margulis and is it Deleuze? Am I correct? There are one or two of the French postmodern people who became quite intrigued with Whitehead. And so, he started coming in through the kind of the back door through these. Well, if these people like Whitehead, then maybe he's okay. And part of the turnoff, unfortunately, was that he process philosophy developed into theology and process theology, and so anything around religion, of course, couldn't be in the philosophy department. And I think that's faded a bit, but and in the 1990s, two Chinese scholars came over and got very terrifically interested in John Cobb and David Griffin's work, and have really, been a huge influence over in China with process thought and ecological civilization. And so I think this is like, I don't know if it's a second or third wave, where it's both more spreading around the world and also in more popular culture. So hopefully, this will continue in this direction.
Hopefully this one lasts, because if it's from the 20s and 30s, we're basically there now. You give it some time, history may repeat itself. But it's a beautiful time, I think, for philosophy, for processing reality in many ways. This is a wonderful get together that we're having, mind at large. If you both had to give us the single most important insight you'd want the listeners to take away from this conversation, something that could generally shift how they understand mind and reality, what would that be? Jared, you can start.
Yeah, I think just like all the opportunity that there is, that these are live philosophical questions, that some of the big questions about the nature of reality aren't in fact settled, and there's very interesting ideas from all kinds of contexts, different cultures, different historical periods, that we really ought to, yeah, reinvestigate and take seriously, and bring together creatively and synthetically to produce just more live options for tackling these things.
John?
I guess that there are important ways of understanding our everyday experience, our exceptional experience, that are coherent with religion, with philosophy, with science, and that all of these things can be understood in a way that illuminate one another and don't conflict and produce problems, and that there are worldviews that can open up things in a way we can, as William James said, can you live it? And I think we can live all these things together in a way that will be empowering for individually and culturally.
Yeah, and I think having two people like you on board in this journey to take us there it's really a pleasure. It's such a privilege to chat to both of you, such experts in your field, and you bring such great work to the world that it's just going to be amazing to watch you guys in person. So I personally just want to say thank you so much for joining me and being part of this with me. It's a real pleasure. So thank you both for joining me today.
Well, once again, thank you for specifically helping publicize and promote the Mind at Large project, but more generally for all your work in exploring these ideas, and with your incredible interview skills and background knowledge, and you're bringing a big contribution to this whole movement.
Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
thanks.
Sorry, John.
Yeah, thanks for looking into all the things we've been up to, and asking such great and rich questions for this dialogue.
It's been an absolute pleasure for me. Sorry, John.
And thanks for not looking into some of the things we've been into.
Yeah. So, guys, is there anything about Mind at Large project, just in general, that you feel you haven't mentioned, you'd like to actually get out there? Please do. This is your time.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just say head to the program page, the project page, and follow up. We have a sign up form to get updates. I mean, our conference is really coming together. This first event at Exeter in April. So if you want to be early to get early bird pricing on tickets once we open registration, sign up to the email list there, and you'll get other updates as things come along as well. And yeah, if you're also playing around with these ideas as a graduate student, even an undergraduate student, or an early career scholar, we really invite you to submit an abstract and maybe participate alongside some of our other panelists for the event. And even if not, we'd certainly love to have you in Exeter. And we'll have online options as well for streaming the conference. So.
Yeah.
And in case you aren't completely convinced, I recommend that you go back and look at Tevin's interviews with Peter and Matthew and Ellie and Andrew Davis, and I'm sure
and lots
that
more to come as well.
those are terrific.
Yeah. So we've got a whole bunch more planned. Hopefully we'll get far more guests on board as well. The goal is to get as many big thinkers as possible coming together and just make this as best as we can. And we've already got such great people in the two of you. So thank you very much for being there. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.
Same here. Thank you, Tevin.